wish that I could freely dream and be judged from within, hunted by a power that cannot see past my skin. My views are viewed as ignorant, my truth always denied. My history is shrouded in a spider web of lies. Isn't this America?
Okay.
Or is this America? All a lie.
Of the freedom of speech, somewhere I read. Of the freedom of press, somewhere I read that the greatness of America is the right to protest far right.
How can I pledge allegiance to a country built on lies? Or raise my children?
Wow, that was a quick break. Welcome,
very quick.
Welcome back to At the Round Table with Mel. I'm your host, Larry Elson. My co-host, my brother from another, Dr. Bradley. Doctor's in the house.
I'm here, as you said, from the checkup to the neck up.
There you go.
The neck up to the checkup. Whatever, however you word it. I love it.
Check up from the neck up.
Check up from the neck up.
That means we want to see what's going on upstairs,
in the
right?
head, yeah.
And no one better at doing that.
We try the best. I do what I can, what I got, brother.
I love your analysis. Like I said, it's like, you know how they're in the newsroom and you say, okay, and now we'll throw it over to you, Dr. Bradley. That's the fluid here.
That's
right?
the fluid, yeah, exactly.
And that's why it works here. And Pastor Hobbs keeps us in line here. We were out there talking too much. He's like, hey, we don't want no dead air here.
That's right. It's not gonna happen.
Not gonna happen.
Now, that's what this is a crack engineer.
That's
man.
What
it's like I got it going. You guys out there engage in your conversation.
He said the talk is going to be in the room.
That's right. We know Dr. Bradley can get winded.
Exactly. Once again, speaking of which, you want to thank our sponsor, Guarantee Rate Mortgage Company. For all your mortgage needs, give branch manager Cora Holbrook a call at area code 781-342-0252. Guaranteed Mortgage is located at 75 State Street in downtown Boston, Mass. Guarantee Rate Mortgage Company, guaranteed to exceed your expectations. Again, folks, want to remind the Mamdale membership that today is the annual membership meeting, monthly membership meeting, will be held at noon today, 12 p.m. at Mamdale headquarters at 61 Columbia Road. And also a reminder that the Mamdale is turning 55 this year, Dr. 55 years old. Wow. And they're going to be hosting their gala at Valencia's on April 29th, 2023. For tickets and everything more available, give Mamdale a call at 617-436-6868. That's 617-436-6868 for more information and tickets. Give Mamdale headquarters a call there. I know we have some callers online. I want to clear those up, see what folks are. Good morning, caller. Welcome to the roundtable.
Good morning. This is T. Michael Thomas from the People's Academy.
Hey, T. Michael.
Every time I hear him say that, I hope I'm like, he's in the People's Republic. I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah. First of all, T, before you get started, man, listen. I was in my office the other day down in my basement area where my wife has relegated me to at home, doing some work in prep for school. I look up on my television and I see T. Michael Thomas on Channel 4, and the guy's talking about his program,
the People's Academy.
And also talking about that he's running out of his home, and said that T. Michael think you should, it's not gangs, it's
not guns,
but trade, something like that. And I was like, wow. And so much so that I recorded it on my phone, and I'm gonna send it to you. You know what I mean? I'm riding my bike and I'm looking at television. I'm like, oh my God, that's T. Michael. He's getting the exposure. I just want to put that out there, brother.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, you got it.
I've been getting folks has been reaching out to me as far as New Hampshire.
Wow.
Wellesley, it's close. Milton, Canton, Peabody, Dover, but New Hampshire. Someone from New Hampshire actually reached out in support, but not local, where it's designed, created for. That's needed.
Wow.
Yeah.
Right. Now, I wanted to touch on something because in the last segment, Larry mentioned about the convention center.
Yeah.
For full disclosure, before the virus, David Gibbons and I formed a partnership to help and work with People's Academy. Now, I heard also mentioned, they talked about the dragon. If you look on the People's Academy Instagram page on People's Academy, you will see T. Michael with that same dragon with David Gibbons. We are part of that design.
Okay. So let me just set this up, so T. Michael, so so the folks know what we're talking about here, right? In this segment here, so there is a recently quite a few allegations of discrimination and racism going on over at the Boston Convention Center. So let me just read this and bear with me, folks. So this is an article from WGBH's Tory Bedford that's coming out. And the title of it is Black and Latino Legislative Caucus Condemns Deeply Concerning Allegations of Racism at the Convention Center. So, and it reads as follows. Members of the Massachusetts Black and Latino Legislative Caucus have thrown their support behind a state audit of the Massachusetts Convention Center and Authority in response to allegations of racism and discrimination at the independent state authority. The complaints filed by black employees alleging discrimination in hiring, promotion, and working conditions, as well as a lack of diversity among the authority's top employees, are troubling. Executive Director Zavon Billups wrote in a statement on behalf of the caucus, "The fact that there is no diversity officer charged with creating opportunities of people of color is also a cause for concern. Over the past month, 5 employees filed formal complaints with the state attorney general alleging racial bias against employees, vendors, and convention guests, including heightened security at black-sponsored events and pay inequity among employees, according to the report from the Boston Globe. The Massachusetts Convention Center is one of a few independent authorities in state government that does not have a diversity officer. A Globe review also found no black employees among the 25 highest paid employees at the authority, including leadership. State Auditor Diana Zagolio has launched an audit of the authority roughly 1 month after the release of the state audit into its past performance that identified several deficiencies in compliance with state and contract laws. The issues raised by the Boston Globe and Andrea Estes are concerning and fall precisely within the realm of the objectives I have enumerated in my social justice and equity audit plan, DeZolio said in a statement. Multiple employees of color sent an anonymous letter to Governor Maura Healey in January urging her to replace MCAA Executive Director David Gibbons and the rest of his leadership team. Healey's office is conducting its own investigation into the allegations. What has been raised and reported on us is very concerning, Healey told reporters on Tuesday. We're currently reviewing all of that. The Massachusetts Convention Center strongly refutes the assertions and the motivations behind them. According to the spokesperson from the authority, we take seriously the claim that any employee, client, or guest feels discriminated against, mistreated, and undervalued. The MCAA hired law firm Prince Lobel Ty LLP and principal attorney Walter Prince to review our policies and procedures at present and in the past, including the experience of employees of color within the organization and any negative experience that an attendee of color may have had at the BCEC or Hines. The authority received formal notice of the audit, according to the spokesperson. It will be working diligently with DeZola's office. In the anonymous letter to Healey, employees expressed concern about losing their jobs as a result of speaking out individually or drawing attention to cultural issues, according to the Globe. This underscores the need for stronger protection for whistleblowers and for employers to create a culture of accountability and transparency. Billups wrote in his statement on behalf of the Black and Latino Caucus, the allegations of racial and discrimination at the authority are deeply concerning. Michael Curry, the former president of the NAACP Boston branch, says he's worked with David Gibbons to bring NAACP National Convention to Boston this summer. Gibbons and I got together and said we need to change Boston. We promised that the national coming here, Curry said in an interview. I think that's a tremendous opportunity for Gibbons and the rest of his team to seize on that little victory, that relatively little victory, to then start getting big victories and systemic change within the Convention Center Authority. So this goes on. So basically, what they're saying is that, this is a problem that has been existing for quite some time, and the fact that the lack of people of color in any leadership positions is troubling. It should be troubling, but it's almost like this is a common theme throughout any employment, public, state, private, that we're seeing this. And I think it's just almost kismet that on the line is State Senator Nick Collins. T. Michael, stand by for a second. I want to bring the senator in because if I'm not mistaken, the convention center is in your district. Good morning, Senator Collins. Welcome, sir.
Good morning, everybody. How are you, Larry, Doctor, and
How you doing?
Good.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good to hear from you. So, Senator, I don't know if you heard, we were reading this article from GBH and talking about, and it's been in the news quite a bit lately regarding discriminatory practices over at the convention center. I know the convention center is in South Boston, which is part of your district, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
This has to be troubling to you as well, because I know you've been a proponent. Your family has a history of fighting for equality for all, not just some, for all. That's why I was very happy to, and for full disclosure, to get behind your candidacy when you were running the first time for senator, because I know your family's history, and since you've taken office, you have been out front in actually bringing equality to neighborhoods that you represent, all of them, not just some. So thank you for that. And just wanted to get your take on what you're hearing as it's taking place with the convention centers.
Yes. Well, thank you very much. And I heard earlier, T. Michael, I'm glad you were brought into the discussion, hoping you were fairly compensated for that engagement, as that wasn't a cheap piece of artwork. It came at a time, however, when, we were in a pandemic and people were struggling financially. So I'm not so sure that was the best use of our resources. I would have rather seen that go to a nonprofit like the People's Academy or employees.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a conversation for another topic I know that had begun. But as it relates to the overall allegations, they are troubling. Let's not forget that a $1.2 million discrimination settlement was paid out by the Convention Center Authority 2 years ago, 3 years ago. So, as it relates to, how long it's been going on, I think that needs to be put into context. I came out in support of an independent investigation. So obviously that investigation by the auditor's office has begun, and expect other authorities will be doing the same. As the chair of the Committee on State Administration and Regulatory Oversight this session, we're going to be looking into these practices. Our jurisdiction includes competitive bidding on public contracts, so we'll be looking at how we can improve and increase diversity on that. We know that's been a problem for a long time, including public construction. We're focused on open meeting laws, state regulations, state agencies, and reporting and lobbyist reporting laws. Why the state agencies component is key. These quasi-public agencies that run a little bit outside of traditional oversight have this committee does have oversight here. And one thing that you brought up that I know, particularly Mamlio has dealt with, and I find troubling, is the use of public funds, not just on NDAs, which is non-disclosure agreements, which was the case for the settlement that was articulated in the Globe report, along with other employees, and that's something the auditor is going to be looking at statewide, but particularly here at the convention center. And then the use of taxpayer funds to hire private law firms to, investigate, intimidate, harass employees, particularly those that don't have union representation. Totally beyond the pale, and that's not what taxpayer dollars should be used for. And that's something we're going to be taking a look at. And as was articulated by multiple sources in the paper, in the courts today, when it comes to discrimination, we don't even care about the motivation or why, or whether it was intentional or unintentional.
Right. We
care that it exists and that it must be corrected. And I think that's what's important here. So, in terms of, the response, I think more support should be shown to the employees, as well as, the process that's begun and will probably continue as it relates to independent. I think about the MFA. During that period when the Davis Leadership Academy students were subjected to separate and different treatment when they were going on a field trip to the Museum of Fine Arts.
Right.
they tried the same thing. Hire a big private law firm. Former Attorney General Harshbarger is going to investigate them. So I'm leading an agency. I'm going to hire an attorney to investigate me. I just don't think that's viewed as truly independent. So, I think that the use of private attorneys with public funds to investigate themselves, that just doesn't sit well with the public.
Right.
So we expect the authorities empowered to do that independently.
And to that point, and you're right in that aspect, because I argued that point when I was former president of Mamleo, that the city was using they were using taxpayer funding to actually to try to keep in place discriminatory policies and practices on hiring and promotion, and the courts weighed in and said, most recently he'd been here with the promotional exam that is discriminatory. It has been for over 50 years, and the drug testing. So we've seen it here. And it has to be a little troubling, because it's not just the employees there, but reading this and getting a better understanding of it, folks, is that it's saying also when you come there as a paying guest, right? If you're a vendor in there, that you exhibit this is someone who's coming there trying to make a living or spending their money to be discriminated. This reminds me of, we were talking about earlier, of the lunch counter. I'm not going to go to a place and spend my money. That's why I don't visit certain parts of Boston, because I don't feel like they're inviting the people that look like me. I'm not saying anyone there is a racist, but the environment is not welcoming for folks like me. So when I see this and I read this, it has to be troubling. My other question for you, Senator, and I want to get T. Michael as well to weigh in, is what is it that the legislators, because it seems like the governor is the one that is in control of the convention center under her purview. The auditor's looking into it, as well as the AG. But what is it that our elected body, other than the governor, can do to help to remedy and bring some solutions and some remedy to these folks and to the visiting public who attend that, to make it a more welcoming and inviting place?
Well, I think one of the stories articulated the lack of diversity on the board, which is the governing agency, governance. When you have 13 people on a board and only one of them is black,
wow,
and it's in Boston, and the agency is in Boston and Springfield, the two cities that have the highest percent. It's hard to fathom. The convention center operates in Boston and Springfield. It has one person on the board that is black, and 0 in the leadership team. 0 in the top 25. I don't know.
Wait a minute, can you just say that again? Because I think that didn't sink in. Can you break that down again? That breakdown again?
So the MCCA has assets in Boston and Springfield.
Okay.
The two cities in Massachusetts with the highest percentage of African American residents. Yet there's out of 13 members of the board, there's only one who's African American, and there's 0 in the leadership team.
And what does that?
The governance. The governance and operation. That's key. Right, as it relates to laws that govern things like public construction, public bidding, what the committee is going to be looking at, the legislature can make changes so that these agencies will follow stricter guidelines to ensure.
But
there's already practices and best practices in place, including best value procurement, because you want competition. So that more diverse offering is important. So I think when it comes to the legislature, we can fine tune and further refine the regulations. So that's something that we look at in the committee as well, that these quasi-public agencies like the MCCA are governed by. But I do think it's leadership at the governance level and management. So you have to have, they articulate it in the story.
Right. So
the convention center, one of the only agencies that doesn't have a director of diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's just
right. So, Sid, I want to jump in. I want to jump in because I want you to break that down a little bit more for in the layman's terms. When you say in the leadership, can you break down what that encompasses and what those roles are, if you know?
Yeah. So they have the leadership positions.
Let's start at the top. Yeah. Let's start at the top.
Sure. The convention center, like I said, they operate assets. The convention center in Boston. Mm-hmm. They operate the Springfield Convention Center in Mass Mutual with a long-term agreement with MGM Resorts. They have the Boston Common Garage, along with the Heinz Convention Center over in Back Bay. So, you have, executive leadership that runs the authority. They run from, the operations to, HR to, the marketing and sales. So, when you have an organization who at the top doesn't have any diversity, I mean, you have blind spots clearly.
A recipe for disaster.
And then on governance, when the governance, which is the board of trustees, is in the same predicament, more blind spots.
And who appoints that board?
The governor has the authority to appoint 9 out of the 13, and the other 4 are appointed by the mayor.
Mm-hmm.
So, and they have, unilateral authority as articulated in the Globe. So, there is an opportunity. When Governor Baker came in, he basically, vacated the board and put in new folks. So that's the opportunity for, system change.
Mm-hmm.
In addition to any legislative changes that we can make to help, put some more guardrails in place. But, I think it is important how we spend taxpayer dollars, and that's the.
That was my next point too, Senator. If what is the budget, the operational budget for the convention center? How much money are they working with here? And the second question, if you can answer that one, is who should our callers be calling to get some answers and get some changes at that level? But again, what is the budget, and who should they be calling?
Sure. So the budget at the convention center includes, and I think one thing they'll they've been saying is they've been trying to improve the financial position. When you go from $45 million in state taxpayer subsidy to $35 million, I guess that's progress, but you're subsidized by the taxpayers regardless. I mean, it's a lot of money to be.
It is a lot of money,
and
to be using to discriminate.
Well, especially when you're using, some of those resources, like we talked about, for private attorneys to use against your own employees. It's just crazy, the concept.
So what is the salary, if what does the executive directors pay over there? The gentleman?
I think it was reported online. It's like $265,000.
$255,000. That's more than the governor makes.
Yes.
Okay, so we know why these jobs are not available to all. See, we follow the money. Follow the money. And to that point,
I think reaching out to obviously the Black Latino Caucus has articulated their position. So reaching out to folks in the caucus as they've been engaged in this, along with folks in the administration, who are taking a look across the. I mean, the opportunity is that with new administration, they're taking a look across the whole system of all boards and commissions that they have ability to appoint to, and so I think there's been outreach done already, but and continues, because there's a lot of places that need some changes and reform. We'll have opportunities for people to participate in the governance and leadership. So both the caucus, your local, I would start with your local representatives. And senators, and I think it's important to do that.
Well, I'm gonna speak like I'm in a confession, Senator, and this is not you talking. This is me, because I've gone to our Black and Latino caucus in the past on issues such as this, and the response has been deafening and lackluster. Right, so. Folks, I'm not saying you don't do that, but don't expect, because the fact that they weren't on top of this, the fact that it was folks like yourself who and others who brought this out there, brought attention to this, not the Black Latino Caucus, that they weren't even aware of this. And I don't want just a statement from them that we found a problem that somebody brought to our attention. What are you doing about it? What are you doing about it that impacts people that look like you, that you're just in your title alone, you're supposed to be representing? So I don't expect much there based on the history and my personal involvement with them. I don't expect them to do much other than what they've already done, is release a statement. This is where I think the AG and the state auditor and the governor, who are charged with overseeing this, are probably going to have more of an impact on them.
Well, I would say that obviously the statement coming out of the chair of the Black Latino Caucus, Bud Williams of Springfield, and then the caucus as a whole is very strong. And again, it's not. But it's just a statement. You're right. No, but the legislative role is, we will examine policies, practices, but as it relates to, getting to the bottom of what happened here, you're right. The other authorities you mentioned are the ones that will be doing that and are doing that. And that's the appropriate place. But we are at a moment, at a time of change. So I think, I would engage, because I do believe that. All the folks are taking this serious, and just understand that it's not easy for folks to come out, speak out against their employer. I mean, Mamlio's dealt with that for years. And I would also point out that, unlike that situation, my understanding is most, if not all, of the employees that we're talking about don't have any union representation, which is another problem. So, I think there's a lot of issues to unpack here, but I do think that people are taking it serious. They should, and you're right. The appropriate authorities should be continuing to look into this and make sure that we get to the bottom of the truth.
Yeah. T. Michael, you wanted to weigh in?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I would like to, for full disclosure, Senator Nick Collins and Councilor Frank Baker do support the People's Academy. I just want to put that out there. Also, David Gibbons, and let me explain. But I'm not here to defend, deny, or anything of that part of the convention center. I'm only here to speak on my professional and personal experience dealing with David Gibbons.
No, and I think what you're saying, I think that, sometimes we get those little tokens there, right? And I don't mean it I think it's significant for you and what you're doing, but it's a one of, and when you look at it behind the scenes, there's a lot more going on, right? That we see your statue in a prominent place, but behind the scenes, it's that sausage thing, right? No one likes to see it made. And we're seeing people who are suffering, and that even if people were invited to come and view your statue, it may not be so welcoming to, and that's where the problem is.
Well, Larry, can I respond? That particular statue is not what the People's Academy did. Because of COVID, things got stopped. We just recently, the past few months, has been regrouping to continue our possible working relationship. We had certain things in mind to create and bring some diversity there through People's Academy. But what concerns me more is that the People's Academy has been around for over 15 years, and all of these institution elected officials, we've been focusing on the construction industry, the key to the middle class, when Joe Biden himself said there is hundreds of a shortage of construction workers, and yet all of these individuals, the naysayers, not one of them I've seen ever stood up and say, here is a program that was funded by T. Michael out of his pocket for over 15 years, and so many people that we could have helped from going to jail, from going into the street, on street violence, the recidivism. Not one of those individuals, but tell you what, now is a perfect time that let's see from here on out that they're so concerned on diversity, inclusiveness. Let's do the same thing in $1 billion industry, in the construction industry. Let's see who will step up and support the People's Academy to fill that gap.
So I want to get Dr. Bradley's take take on this, because from an academic, Dr. Bradley, we've heard this story so many times. Just interject a different person, right? Just interject black police officers, just interject black firefighters, just interject teachers of college. I mean, in the discrimination, it's so rampant, right? How do we, from an academia approach, how do we deal with this in a way where we're contextualizing this and we're getting some real solutions to these problems? Because we don't know about the convention center, like you said. A lot of folks are afraid. We saw this at City Hall with Chantel Charles, who was the city had to pay out quite a bit of money, and we see it. The taxpayers usually take it on the chin for the behavior, because if a check is written for the behavior, the person that is committing it doesn't get held.
I think that's one of the ways we have to deal with it, and that's just like in policing, where the
qualified
taxpayer,
immunity.
that these individuals are protected under some type of immunity clause in some type of contract, in some type of situation, and they are not personally paying for their
behavior.
Poor decisions or poor behavior. I think another way of dealing with it is that when you actually at the point of designing the staff, making sure that the resources are there, financial resources are there for the administrative staff. Diversity, inclusion, and equity officers should be a part of that.
But they don't have a diversity officer over there.
But I think that unfortunately, when they first built that facility and they identify who's going to run it, that resources should have been in the budget for that particular office. What I'm saying is that in the future, that should always be a part of an administrative staff to run anything that's run by the state or anything that's run by a governmental entity, because we just can't look at it from the perspective that the person will do the right thing because it's the right thing to do.
We've seen that. 617-282-0685, 617-282-0685. You're listening to At the Round Table with Ma'am Leo. Senator Collins,
Yep.
are there any reforms or anything to change that, and can you speak to that?
Well, I think that the doctor hit it on the head, is that it has to be part of the equation from Jump Street. And I'll say that it was, when the facility was built, and the story yesterday spoke to it, that under the previous administration and under previous leadership, the chair of the board, well, first of all, there was, much more diversity on the board.
Mm-hmm.
The chair of the board was an African-American woman. One of the top people at the agency was as well, inside in the executive suite, helping make decisions, helping lead the agency. So that changed under the latest administration, and that was never replaced. That was never brought forth.
Mm-hmm.
So what we've gone ahead to do is file legislation to guarantee that every agency and quasi-state agency across the Commonwealth has to have a director of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yeah.
Although most already do, if not all already do. So it is a little strange that in this day and age that's not done voluntarily. But
Mm-hmm.
in the previous administration, that they had someone leading that effort at the convention center. So, leadership matters, but you're right. How do you put something in place where you're not, you don't have to bank on the subjective outlook of an individual? I think that's important. That's a system change that we're looking at.
Right.
And
Go ahead. Finish your thoughts. No, I was going to say, so you chair the Joint Committee on State Administration and Regulatory Oversight. Can you explain what the duties of that are and how they relate to this?
Yes. So in addition to taking a look at how they're spending funds on things like private attorneys against their employees, we're also looking at public construction. We can put things in place to ensure that we're doing much better as it relates to that area of spending by the state, including other public bids, whether it's land dispositions or other service contracts. Same outlook. And then as it relates to and the operations of these agencies. So like I said, most agencies do operate with a director of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and we want to make sure all do. That it's not up for subjective determination, because we do believe that it's something that should be part of an executive team's conscience daily. So someone's job daily to be focused on that. So that is something we're going to be looking at in the committee and examining what other agencies may be in that situation, and to rectify that.
Right.
But I think that it's important that if we're going to have expenditures like this. I mean, I wish like I said, it was a local vendor, not someone from the New Hampshire border who ended up doing this. So I mean, that didn't prevent them during COVID from working. So I would just suggest to Michael that we need to be sure that local vendors are at the key of the table. I would have loved to see his artwork, and I've seen plenty of it. That would have been nice if it was done locally, so you at least justify some of it. But at this stage, that's small potatoes, as they say, compared to the other issues that are going on,
right,
and that we need to examine down there. So we're going to be committed to that for this session as chair. We're going to be looking at this agency and all other agencies and how they operate to make sure that we're spending taxpayer dollars right. And I know that's something that the auditor's office is focused on, and that's their key mission. And that we're using funds in a way that is trying to bring out our best, and that is used properly, and that's something of great concern.
Well, I think that the timing.
I have a question for the Senator, Larry.
Okay, go ahead.
Hello?
Go ahead, T. Mike.
Senator, I know you're familiar with the Beasley building. Councilor Baker and I, for either the end of this month or the beginning of the next month, we are seeking funds to train individuals to be trainers. Can we count on you, and also ask you to ask your constituents the governor, the mayor, and all of the elected body and leadership of this city to help us get these operational funds to address the shootings, the street violence, and the income inequality and all the good stuff. I know I'm preaching to the choir, but I'm here to ask you, we need your support to make this happen, to save lives.
Well, I thank you, T. Michael, for all your work. You've been doing this a very long time, putting all your personal sweat equity in, your finances, your home, putting it all on the line to help people. You're a great craftsman and a great, citizen. So you have my support, and I think what you're doing is fantastic. And I'm hopeful that whether it's in addition to the Beasley building, that we're going to see more of your apprentices. And what they bring to the table. They're of the city. They're coming in, trying to make it a better place, and we're going to support that.
So, thank you, Senator. So, just for full disclosure, I sit on the Post, the Police Oversight Standard and Training Committee, one of the inaugural commissioners, and we're governed by the open meeting laws. And I know you're frequent. I see your name on there quite often when we have these meetings. So I'm assuming that the convention center is under the same regulations under the open meeting laws, because I saw something the other day. It was the first time I'd even know anything about this. Was a quasi state agency, and it was the first time I even learned that they even had these type of meetings, and they're still doing them by Zoom as we are. But how do we get that information also to public? Because, like I said, if you do something in public, but it's mainly almost private because no one knows it's happening, right? Then you have the audience that you need. It's almost like having Fox viewers viewing just one broadcast. How do we get that information out to folks when these meetings are taking place so people can see in real time what's taking place?
Well, yes, we are going to be looking at that across the state system with respect to the open meeting laws. In particular, quasi-public agencies have a little bit of more. They have more independence than state agencies like Mass DOT, Department of Education, Health and Human Services. Have different regulations and are much more stringent than, let's say, Massachusetts Port Authority or the Convention Center Authority. However, and this is something that we had debated with Massachusetts Port Authority several years ago, where they wanted to make decisions on big contracts or land dispositions. And they wanted to do that in what's called executive session, away from the public. And the executive session element and opportunity for boards of this kind are there for the ability to not make their position weaker as it relates to whatever their maybe competitive bidding is going on. And I understand that, but when you're making a designation of a significant kind, and it's the public, that should be done in public.
Right.
I think these board meetings need to be done in public. They need to be, if they're going to be hybrid or they're going to be online, they need to be using tools that everyone else uses, not internal Teams networks. And then, when you have a board meeting that is online and then it goes dark and then never turns on again because they're, quote, in executive session all the time, that's a lot of subjective power to give folks who are using public dollars to make decisions and public assets to make decisions for the public without their knowledge. So I agree that has to be brought out of the shadows, and that we also are going to be taking a look at the subjective nature of allowing public comment. I don't know why you have a public meeting if there's no public comment. That should be a guarantee, not like hey, if you're good, we're going to let you speak. What? It's a public meeting. It's a public board meeting. That has to change. That's something we'll be looking at.
Right. No, and that's what we, like I said, we use executive session but we don't use it. We're very cognizant of the perception of it that people think you're going in to hide, and it's just the opposite, and that's why we use it very sparingly. And when we do, it is to protect information that is not germane to the public, and the public doesn't need public consumption, but it's not to hide things, and so that's what I do. But Senator, before we run out of time, I just also want to pivot for a second, because I know this is a pretty big week for you in the community. It's the St. Patrick's Day celebration, and what else is going on in your office, and how can folks participate in that, and tell us what's going to be taking place next weekend, as it's a huge and a huge event over in South Boston area, but for the whole city, but predominantly in the South Boston, Dorchester neighborhoods.
Well, yeah, we take on a lot that weekend, with 35,000 people in South Boston and about 1 million coming to town, so the transit system's going to be pressured.
And they can only go 15 miles an hour now.
Yeah, they're taking their time. It's going to be a slow boat, but folks are being, with a lot of people coming from outside the city, we're encouraging a lot of people to take the commuter rail to take pressure off the red line. But we have engaged the authorities to make sure people are safe. We did have some last year, not just at the parade, but at different public events across the city, some unwelcome guests that were spreading messages of hate and that propaganda. So we've engaged the authorities at the state, local, and federal level to make sure that we have resources and a plan and a message to ensure that everyone who's here and coming in is going to be enjoying themselves. And we dealt with that pretty swiftly last year, but we're going to be on high alert to make sure that everybody can come into the city and the community safely. That it continues to be a place where families and people all over the place can come and enjoy. So we want a safe and inclusive day. So we've been spending extra time this year in preparation for that. And for those interested in coming on the 19th, just reach out to my office. We're happy to accommodate. But I think safety is a big deal that day, and we'll be able to I think have a better day for visitors because we're going with the traditional route, which starts at Broadway Station and ends at Andrew Station. So there'll be less sort of crunching. Like last year there was just a shorter route from Broadway Station to the end of Broadway, which jammed everybody in a small area. So we're taking all the precautions. We just had a meeting last evening with the commissioner and other law enforcement agencies. The mayor was with us, along with Congressman Lynch, Council President Flynn, Representative Beal, and we had a good discussion about planning for that. So we feel like we're prepared, and that everyone should feel safe and welcome to come in and enjoy the day from wherever they're coming from.
And
but
just emphasize patience.
For those interested in watching, you can watch it on TV or on radio,
right.
As well as online.
And I tell people just have a good time, but exhibit patience. Are there any other public events scheduled this week that the public, that they may be aware, that you're aware of, that people can participate leading up to the big parade this and celebration this coming weekend?
I think there are some events that we like to celebrate on the 17th that include, quite frankly, it's not just a celebration of St. Patrick's Day, but Evacuation Day. Right. And what's key, and what's something that I've always appreciated about it, is it shows the deep connection between Roxbury and South Boston, where, when we were preparing overnight to expel the British, it was a group of, young men and women who, in the dark of night, dragged cannons. Think about this. Think about dragging cannons from Fort Hill in Roxbury up to Dorchester Heights in South Boston, now South Boston, at the time Dorchester, freezing, terrible weather, in order to position the residents of Boston to seek their own determination. And that's what happened. So we celebrate that. We have historical exercises on the 17th, which is St. Patrick's Day. But an interesting tidbit, on the day, March 17th, when the British were finally expelled, as people were coming from all over the region, in order to get in the ranks, the sign to get in was Boston, and then the countersign for those coming in to Boston to join the ranks. And at the time, with all the spies, nobody knew what was going on. But if you had this information, you were let in and you could join the fight. It was St. Patrick. So when you met to the line, if you came in from Vermont or somewhere else and you came into Boston to get through the line, they would say Boston, and you would have to respond St. Patrick, or you couldn't get in. And that's in 1776. So that's March 17th, 1776. So that history is intertwined along with the history of Roxbury and South Boston joining forces to make sure that we were able to be the first city to experience that kind of freedom. So we wanted to celebrate on March 17th, both at Dorchester Heights Fort Hill, and then usually we're at the Shirley Eustace house afterwards for some lunch.
Well, Senator, you woke Dr. Bradley up with that history. As soon as you start talking that history, he perked up over here, and I know he wants to weigh in.
No, I was going to say a lot of people refer to that as Bluff Day because there was not, although the cannons would. He's right. They actually drag it from parts of the city to Dorchester. Snowy day, horses, ice, but they didn't have any ammo. So when they actually came and inspected when the British came and inspected the fortifications, they went back to the commander and said, "I have never seen anything so intelligently organized. Maybe we should go to New York."
Wow!
And didn't have any ammo.
See, you get a history lesson. So, any legislative issues going on, Senator, that folks you need the public support on, or anything that you have that out there that folks should be aware of that affect them?
I think the legislation that we're pushing forth about having leadership at every agency and organization that's diverse is critical, and we're going to be spending some time taking a look at how we can really make a dent in the impacts around mental health and substance abuse that are seeing. I know that Mass and Cass has been a focus area, but as we know, in parts that I represent, Worcester Square in the South End, Nubian Square in Roxbury, Andrew Square in South Boston, Edward Everett Square in Dorchester, that sort of continues to grow in concentric circles. And I think, while the BMC has been taking on an incredible burden there, they have a limit. And, I think we need some new strategies. I know that sort of brick and mortar has been such a concern. I'd like to see us consider, and I went to Tufts doing a medical as a kid. Now it's, Tufts Medical Center. And you learned a lot about, because, years ago when there was public health crises, particularly among youth, they created a floating hospital. So we have, land problems. We have real estate problems as it relates to acquiring sites, where they get located, for services. And people have concerns about that, and rightfully so, as it relates to impacts locally. I think we need to be looking at the water, whether that's a bridge to Long Island or a boat to Long Island or just a hospital. We have a great example of what we can do with the water. One of the best medical facilities in the world is the USNS Comfort, or the USNS Mercy, which is out of San Diego. Those are naval ships, full-scale hospitals that serve people here, that serve people around the world. So we have capabilities out there, and we're going to be reaching out to our cruise industry and the industries that benefit here in the Port of Boston to see what we might be able to do in partnership with the city and the state to really put a dent in this crisis. Because I think we know it's about service and intervention, and the challenge has been where and who's impacted.
Right.
And if we can limit that, take that challenge out of the equation, I think we're going to have a way forward.
Yeah, because you're right. That because if we don't, that plugs up our criminal justice system, because a lot of them are intertwined. When you have a problem with substance, you don't care about what you need to do to get. You're not concerned about going to jail because you're more concerned about getting that monkey off your back, as they say. So, Senator, what's going on in the Seaport? I know there's been an effort to try to also diversify that area because it's growing. It's quite. Dr. Bradley, he's quite wealthy. He spends a lot of time eating out down there.
Okay.
I'm a drive-through guy, so I don't get.
When I drive through, I get lost, and I used to patrol that area when I was a police
drive-through,
officer.
I mean where they say you want a number 7 or a number 8.
Oh no,
see, that's my wallet.
I wouldn't even think about that. I wouldn't even associate that with
that's
you.
My drive-through.
Okay,
that's my drive-through.
Yeah. Okay.
I know there's been an effort to increase the more diversity in the business side as well as the housing in that community. How are we doing in those efforts?
Great. Yeah. So we're working with Massport has stepped up. They have a parcel that they are, looking at for affordable housing, finally, and workforce housing that we believe is going to be great ability. But we need to do more of that. We need to do more of a mix. And I think the partners that we can work with the strongest right now are public owners. Massport's one of the largest landowners down there, and they've been great to work with. They've led on the Massport model. And so, but also, as you mentioned, business. Business is key. Retail opportunities, other business opportunities. And we're starting to see that. We have a great partner with WS Development, who has really gone out there and try to recruit. Obviously, some great announcements recently. Grace Barnea, owner at Darrell's, who's expanding down there. But that's a real challenge, and we need to stay focused on it. I think when it comes to both diversity and local talent, what we can't have us confronting our international forces financially that are putting pressure on it. Because if you're a retail business and you're going to spend 80% of your money on the rent, that's not going to work.
Yeah.
Right.
So, as an owner, WS Development's been looking at creative ways to help make that work. But I think, when it comes to the policies, I know that BPDA is looking at this, and we did this with the plans for the redevelopment of the Edison plant for Boston, is at the baseline, at the permitting phase, making sure there are sort of set-asides for basically local and particularly discounts for diverse owners. Like we put in the board memo there that if you're designated by the city or the state or defined that way as a disadvantaged business, that you get a discount on the market rent, for the entire time that you're there. So you're not getting hammered on basically rents that can only be sustained by these national chains, which is totally takes away from the vibe of any place.
Right.
We don't want that either. And WS Development is doing a great job. And the announcement yesterday by Samuels Associates to make $1 million donation for training program with the Ben Franklin Institute. We're seeing that matched effort by our private partners stepping up. We need to see more of that.
Yeah.
But one of the things that we're looking at in the legislature, where the life science industry is pretty significant down there as well, is how we build in more incentives and standards for diversity and inclusion. And you're seeing businesses like Vertex that are doing that, but we want to see that across the entire industry.
Yeah.
And so that's going to be a focus of ours this year too.
So, Senator, before we get you go, because we're getting short on time here. This has been a fascinating conversation. Is that I think that doesn't get enough conversation. One is workforce here in the state as well as in the city of Boston has become very expensive to live in. We're having a difficult time attracting talent here because what city and state salaries are just don't keep you in line to be able to afford to live here when some of the mandates, particularly in Boston, you have to live here. But also want to get your thoughts, if you have any, on the city council just passed 11-2 rent control here in the city of Boston, but people are not aware that has to be passed through the state. The state has to give it its blessing, and most people are saying it doesn't look like that's going to be something that's going to be embraced at the state level. Want to get your thoughts on that if you have any, sir.
Yeah, I think that, if we didn't have a problem, this wouldn't even be a debate. So we have a problem, and we have to fix it. I think there's a couple schools of thought, and when you deal with an issue that maybe have a particular view or in Boston, and that has different views statewide, it's about getting to consensus. And so we're going to have that debate this session as well. But I think you pointed out, at a baseline, we need to increase wages. Because what they're saying is, we can't, what the statistics are saying is wages are not keeping up with rent.
Yeah, right.
So you got to look at it both ways.
Right.
A combination of, how do we deal with the pressures of rent that are going up, and that, so for instance, if you are, affordable housing right now, rents are tied to the growth in wages.
Yeah.
But if you're on fixed income or you work for the city, and the city has recognized that's why they've given waivers to employees coming in,
Right.
is because they can't afford it.
Right.
So we have to raise wages at the city and the state level. We have to figure out ways to do that, as well as trying to find ways to mitigate the growth of rents that are putting people, particularly on fixed income, on an unsustainable path.
Right.
And so, if you're on fixed income, let's say, and your rent is able to go up based off of the wages, and that may be fine in the private market, but if you're on Social Security and your increases are based off of votes by the Congress, I'm not so sure that jives.
Right.
Or if you're a veteran, same thing. Your veterans benefits, get voted on by the Congress. They're not automatic.
Right.
They're not tied to those indices. So I think we got to be doing both. We got to find ways to build more affordable housing for sure. Find ways to mitigate the rising costs of rent and raise wages.
Right.
It's got to be sort of a three-pronged approach.
All right. Well, Senator, we got to. It sounds like we have a math problem as well as a rent problem. So, and the two just aren't in line. Senator Nick Collins from the 1st Suffolk, sir, thank you, and thank you and your family for always. I mean, it's in your genes, in your DNA, on why you guys care and why you all give everyone a fair shot. And I want to thank you for that, and I appreciate you, and I wish you and your family well. As it has grown since we first met. So I thank you for all you do for your constituency, because, like I said, there's never been a time that I've reached out that you or someone in your family has not responded with an answer. May not always be the one I want, but at least it's an answer.
A response.
A response. And a lot of times that in itself is progress. Thank you, sir, and look forward to seeing you next Sunday at the big event.
Thank you all.
All right.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Nick Collins, the 1st Suffolk. Lot net out, Dr. Bradley. 2 hours.
Yeah, a lot of information.
That's
a lot of good information.
We're out of here.
Okay.
We are located at 670 Washington Street in Dorchester, Massachusetts.